Welcome to your next podcast on telecommunications and networking. If you recall, when you did your hardware and software podcast, one of the things I said in that podcast was there are three fundamentals to an information system: hardware, software, and networks. And it is those networks that we are going to talk about today. There are a lot of people who also talk about telecommunications and networking together, and thus the title of the slides. But before we begin, look at the computer systems around you. Okay, most of you would not be on a computer had it not been because of the internet. The proliferation of computers inside an organization really took space when computers started to go along in a network. Okay, so a lot of people believe that it is networks and not computing, although the two are very interrelated, that is driving most of the change in an organization. Let's distinguish very quickly between telecommunications and networking. Telecommunication is the idea of connecting, is the idea of communicating information through either voice or data across a distance. Networking, conceptually, is the idea of actually attaching electronic devices to the telecommunication. So we might use telecommunications to connect devices, but the idea behind it is networking. It's a much larger concept. Telecommunication came out of the telephone idea. It was restricted to only one device initially. Today, if you look around you, your cell phones are connected to your computers, are connected to another computer, are connected to speakers, are connected to wireless speakers, you name it. That is the idea behind this term of networking, which is what we are going to talk about today. Networks in itself, you can think about them as another system. Okay, we talked about systems in our introductory lectures. There's a person, this is the people part, okay, the IT part, okay, and the structure part, okay. This is also a socio-technical system where you have to understand how people interact with IT, which then interacts with the rest of the network. And it's very important to understand it, because not a lot of people get confused by networks a whole lot of time. So what is the need for networking, and what do they do for us in terms of business as well as home? We'll bring some of your home concepts, and I'll ask you some of the questions if you go through the flash setting. This is the basic premise. Okay, this is the basic premise of networks. This is going to be our fundamental slide for the rest of the networking session. We have two computers that we want to connect with each other. Okay, let's see. We have two computers that we want to connect with each other. How do we connect them? Computers traditionally don't speak the same language as us. If you look at the way I speak, okay, I can modulate, I can speak high, I can speak low, I can vary my voice, and there's meaning in all of that. But from a computer perspective, all we are doing is speaking in ones, zeros, ones, zeros. Okay, so from a graphical perspective, it looks like this. Okay, you can see the difference in the graph. When we started connecting computers, we were primarily connecting them over telephone lines, which were designed for analog communication and not for digital communication. So we intervened and converted this digital transmission into what is called as an analog transmission through the use of a modem. Okay, you remember those good old days when you used to connect your computer through a modem telephone line, and you got this noise. That was the idea of the modem, converting it into an analog signal and then going with it. This was the telephone line. Okay, the other modem understood that language and converted it back into digital. So this part was analog, this was digital. Okay. Now, thus all of these components become very important. Computing devices, as we understand now, can be anything. They just don't have to be restricted to computers. In terms of a transmission line, telephone line, there are many different types that are available. We'll have to understand the type and speed. We'll do a quick overview of the different protocols, and we'll try and understand how data packets actually flow through the network. Okay. There are three big pieces, actually four big pieces of telecommunication and networking. First is this idea of analog versus digital. Second is this idea of transmission lines and or communication channels. Third, network types. And fourth, the protocols. Let's talk about each one of them as we go along. First, about communication processes, analog versus digital. Okay. As we already talked about, this idea of a modem is really important. It stands for a modulator demodulator, basically a device that converts data from digital to analog and vice versa. Now let me take a quick poll here. Again, if you do the digital version, why do you if you have a cable or a DSL, do you have a modem? For those of you who said yes, you do have a modem, but it's not technically a modem, but these are bridges to a digital network. Because what does DSL stand for? DSL stands for digital subscriber line. Okay, and cables today have become digital. Okay, so if you go back a couple of slides and look at the graphs that I've drawn, we no longer need to convert from digital to analog. The data can be transmitted in a digital format, and that is why what you have is not a modem. So why do we call it a modem? We call it a modem because it's easy to call it a modem, because people understand it. Okay, that is why we call it a modem. But modems are getting extinct. As a matter of fact, most laptops that come out today might not have a modem, as is traditionally said. What they have is what is called as a network interface card, where you can plug in your LAN cables and things like that, just to connect to a local network directly. Next, let's talk about communication speeds and bandwidths. These are two terms you need to understand before we talk about communication channels. Bandwidth is the amount of information that can be transmitted from one location to another in a fixed amount of time, or a capacity. Common unit is bits per second, and the table below shows you exactly how many bits per second you need to download a page in a reasonable amount of time. To understand it further, think about it like a tap. Okay, and the tap, the volume of water that is flowing out of that tap, okay, that is your bits per second. Okay, it's analogous to this, and this pipe that we have that brings the water to us, or brings the bytes to us, is called the communication channel. Now, the various kinds of communication channels that exist that exist. Let me get rid of this. The various kinds of communication channels that exist. The most common one that we have seen, you plug out your phone and you look at the wire that's connected to your phone. Don't really plug it out. I mean, you can see it from a distance. I'm not going to pay the bill for it. But it's called the twisted pair. You will see cables of twisted pair, usually four twisted pair cables in there. 2 are enough to run a phone line. 4 is what you need to run a LAN connection. The speed for a phone line, we all know the good old days, 14.4 kbps to 56.6 kilobytes per second. The first one I ever used was 28.8 kilobytes per second. And guess what? At that time, we were really happy to be able to connect to the internet. We were able to download stuff. We were able to see text. We were connected with the rest of the world suddenly. And there was a lot of textual information online on the web at that time. The second type that's very commonly seen is called the coaxial cable. Baseband is pretty much dead now. Okay, broadband cable. This is the cable line that comes to your home, and it can generate a lot of. It can give you data to a very large extent. It ranges from 10 megabytes per second to 2 gigabytes per second. Now, for my cable, for my friends who have cable at their home, okay, they might be wondering why they get less speed than 2 gigabytes per second. By the way, to check the speed of download, you can go to a website called by the way, to check the speed of download that you're getting on your computer, you can go to a website called Speed. Why did this happen? To check the download speed that you're getting on your computer, you can go to a website called speedtest.net. And you can actually verify whether you're getting the right amount of speed for what you're paying. What most of you will find is you're getting less speed than the max that I'm saying you should be getting. This is because cable companies ration out the amount of speed that should go out. They want to charge more based on more speed. Again, the idea is still like a tap. They control the valve. Okay, this is controlled by the cable companies. The more water you want, the more you have to pay. The more bandwidth you want, the more you have to pay. The other one that exists around UNF, and you've connected to it using your laptops, is the wireless network. Okay, and the speeds for this range from 11 megabytes per second to 56 megabytes per second. Again, see the difference. We went from kilo to mega right here. Okay, you've also seen that there are a lot of different standards out there. You've heard terms like 802.11b, G, N, and before that there was A, which is dead now. What are these things? These are all electronic standards of communication. Okay, now if you look at your phone, your cordless phone, those old cordless phones, okay, they work on certain frequencies, right? 800 megahertz, and now they've gone to 5.2 or 800 I think it was megahertz, 5.2 megahertz. This is 800 kilohertz. And there was 2.4 in the middle, and so on and so forth. Again, these are all languages in which they talk to each other. For example, I'm talking to you in English at a particular level, at a particular megahertz. That is what these are. An 802.11b can give you a maximum of 11 megabytes per second. 802.g gives you 56, N gives you 56 with a much greater area that is getting covered. These are all protocols that are approved by IEEE's certain groups that are responsible for it. They've come out with standards for B and G. N is still a draft standard, and it hasn't been approved, but it is going to get approved very shortly. So next time when you invest in a wireless modem, invest in either a G or an N. Don't buy a B anymore. Okay. Same thing for your computer. If you buy a computer with a built-in wireless transmission device, you're going with B or G. You also have other wireless systems. You have infrared. Where have we used infrared? Now this is like a Jeopardy question. I should put a Jeopardy music behind it. But you all used infrared. Home TV remote. Okay, that is an infrared connection. Again, I told you networking is about connecting to devices, and we are connecting the remote control to another device. Okay, now networking, infrared in this sense is used a lot in underwater connections. It is used where you want secure connections between two devices. It's cheap, it's easy to do, it has a visible line of sight, and you can do it. The other one is satellite or microwave based connections. As a matter of fact, the state of California is going to invest a lot of money in trying to get satellite connections for microwave based satellite connections. They're going to set up a unit to research facility to harness power of sun outside the atmosphere, and then transmit it back using microwave, and it'll contain data as well in there. There's one I haven't mentioned, and that and we use a lot in our day-to-day life, which is called Bluetooth. Bluetooth is slightly different than everything else. Bluetooth, again, it's a wireless standard. It comes out of the same family as 802.11 standards. The only difference between this and the rest of the things that we have discussed so far, the rest of the things you can use for any kind of network. Bluetooth is designed for personal area network and short area network, which means it's designed primarily to connect your wireless headphone to your cell phone, or your cell phone to your car, so on and so forth. Okay. The final one that you have to know is called the fiber optic connection. You see these strands, each of these strands, okay, each of these strands carries light inside them. Okay, rather than communicating by transmitting electrons from one location to another, we now carry it through light. What does it empower us to do? It suddenly increases. Each of these strands can carry significantly more data than all of the above technology combined. Okay, significantly more than all of the above technology combined. So think about the speed of network that you will get. Now, if you are thinking that you might not need that kind of a speed, you're wrong, because we were very happy when we had 56.6 kbps. Suddenly photographs became important and people wanted to move on, then video, and then movies, and today Netflix is starting to broadcast movies online, DVD quality movies online. There's a school out in Florida, aviation school out in Florida, which is testing this fiber optic network to teach people in Utah on how to fly using simulators. It is being used extensively by medical professionals to give clear images and request experts from different countries to help operate when they're not present. It is going to change the way we live. There are only a few areas where we actually have fiber optic at least placed inside the community around Jacksonville. I know this community near in St. Augustine, right on US 1, Valencia. That community is wired internally using fiber optics. But then when you go out, you're still getting to the old AT&T network. So when the future arrives, they'll be ready for it. Okay. Also understand that we are way behind when it compares to the internet connection, especially when you look at cost. Okay. This is a graph of how much we pay and what speed we get. This is the latest fiber optic network that the US is putting in by Verizon. I think it's called Fios. Okay, this is the idea of putting a fiber optic right to your home, and look at the cost that is there. Here in Jacksonville we have something called UVerse, which is the idea of bringing fiber optic to your junction box and then taking a twisted pair into your house. Yes, that'll improve speeds, etc. But even all of this, it's almost the same cost. We are still significantly behind than the rest of the world in this. And guess what? We invented the internet. Okay, these Lafayette is a very interesting case study. This is their they went back and started treating the internet as a public commodity, something like a community-based facility where they actually, like electricity, like JEA here, and they established their own network. And at $58, at almost one third the cost, they are able to provide significantly more bandwidth to their consumers. Cox Cable actually moved out. They protested, they sued them, etc., and then moved out from there. There's a very beautiful video called "The Net at Risk," okay, which is linked down below, that you all should watch. I'm not sure here. The discussion regarding fiber optics in the US also raises some important questions. First of all, let's look at the world around us. In Stockholm, for $11 a month, you can get 100 megabytes per second upload and download. At best, in the US, you can get it for 145 bucks. What you get for 145 bucks is 20 megabytes of upload and 50 megabytes of download speed. Most of us are around 15 megabytes per second if we are lucky, and 2 or 3 megabytes per second if we are lucky in this area. Okay, this is the latest service by Verizon called Fios, which is the idea of bringing fiber optics straight to your house. Or in this area, in Jacksonville area, we have something called UVerse from AT&T, which will come to speeds close to this, but they're not bringing fiber optics close to your home. What they're doing is they're bringing fiber optics to the junction box and then using a twisted pair to get to your house. Lafayette, that you see above that, is a very interesting thing. Lafayette started treating their internet connection as an infrastructure commodity, as a public good, and that really paid off. And as a matter of fact, Cox Cable sued them and then moved out. And look at what they are able to provide at $58, at least half of the upload and download speed. If you think you don't need this kind of a speed, again, you're wrong. The more the speed, the more consumption we have had. We never thought we needed YouTube, and YouTube we can't live without now. What is also happening is that these companies, Verizon, AT&T, etc., they're also saying that they need to change the world of the internet slightly. On the internet, everything is considered as equal. Okay, that's one of the basic premises of the internet. Verizon, AT&T, and all this coalition is basically saying the more you pay, the faster you'll go. I'll create a toll road. Sounds good in theory, however, it prevents new innovations like YouTube, like Google, like Amazon to come up. Because if you don't have the money, they're not going to let you through. Okay, they're going to put you in this miserably slow lane, which is going to keep getting crowded and crowded, and you'll be forced to pay more. And Bill Moyers did a very good video called "The Net at Risk" in this regard. I'm going to put a small. The next thing you see is a small snippet of that. There's a larger video associated with it, and I would strongly encourage you to look at the net at risk in this regard. Okay.
The way the internet works today, everyone is connected to each other through the same level playing field. But a handful of phone and cable companies want to change all that. They want to lock down parts of the web and make sites pay them more money to use it. Everyone else will get the slow lane. How will they do that? By killing one of the internet's founding principles, net neutrality.
So what is net neutrality?
I'm not even sure what net neutrality means.
You connect to the web through pipes owned by telephone and cable companies. But the deal is they're not allowed to mess with what's inside those pipes, whether it's Google or Yahoo, Lonely Girl or Bill O'Reilly, everyday citizens or business tycoons. Everybody's website gets the same speed and quality. That's called net neutrality.
So what's the debate? That actually seems quite fair.
Yes, almost too fair. It's as though the richer companies get no advantage at all.
The companies want to set up a restricted fast lane on the internet, but only for their partners and services. Only sites who pay them a huge fee would be allowed to use it, making them gatekeepers.
But thanks to you, the tides are turning. Over 1 million Americans have petitioned Congress to protect our internet's level playing field. And with your help, we can make net neutrality the law in our new Congress. So sign the petition, call your representatives, and share this message with friends. And use the internet to save the internet at savetheinternet.com.
So now that you understand what the importance of net neutrality, let's expand on where the control on the internet comes from. I also wanted to point out from this slide the fact that the reason why you need to know the multiple channels through which a network can be established. Now this is a picture of the undersea cables, undersea fiber optic cables that exist around the world that are laid to connect us through the internet across the world. What happened in 2007 was right about here. A ship dropped anchor and it severed a few of these lines. 1 year later, a ship dropped anchor here and severed a few of these lines. And guess what is happening in this country? There are a lot of call centers in this country that suddenly, which were connected to the internet, that suddenly went bust. In that case, a lot of that had to be relayed back through satellite communication systems. Now granted, it's slower, but at least it worked for the time being. And a lot of your job, a lot of your colleagues, a lot of people who depend on the systems that you will be implementing will depend on these kind of networks, and thus you have to be cognizant of the effect of networks can have on you. Next thing that we need to understand is communication protocols. Protocols are like languages. I'm talking in English, you are able to understand it. If I suddenly switch to another language, you won't be able to understand it. It's an agreed on set of rules and conventions, like the grammar. Okay. The most common one is TCP/IP now, or Internet Protocol. It has 5 layers. These are the layers that are listed on the slide: application layer, transportation layer, internet layer, data link, and the physical layer. The last two, or data link and physical, we're not really worried about. Well, this is primarily the network engineers and computer engineers work at this level, and we just assume that they exist for us. We are interested in the top 3: the internet layer that governs the standard, the transportation layer that allows end-to-end communication, and the application layer, which basically allows 2 applications to talk to each other. The application layer has recently gained a lot of prominence in the e-business arena, and we talk a lot about this in the e-business course that I also teach. Also, there are 2 basic network software models that you have to understand. There's a peer-to-peer system and there's a client-server system. The client-server system is the more popular architecture, where we have a central server and everybody else connects to it and gets it. Blackboard is an example of this. Whenever you go through your Internet Explorer and connect to a website, you are connecting to a client-server architecture. A peer-to-peer architecture, here there is no server. Everybody is treated equally and everybody does all the job. In a client-server system, most of the load is at the file server. Here the load is shared, and there are examples like Napster, Groove, even instant messaging that rely on this kind of an architecture. Here, if client 1 wants to communicate with client 2, they directly talk to each other, or with client 3. Okay, there is no server in the middle. The advantages of this, it's a more homogeneous network. It's a more natural network. We don't go through an intermediary all the time. The problem with this network, governance is more difficult. Okay. In terms of physical layout, there's the local area network, which is like UNF. It's within an organization, almost 2 or 3 miles. It's the most trusted network. Okay. Then we have backbone networks. These are networks. These are big cables that connect across different networks. For example, we have the Lambda rail between various Florida universities. Then we have the wide area network, which is like a LAN but just over a much wider area. Okay. And then we have global area networks, which is nothing but a WAN across geographically dispersed areas. And nobody pretty uses this. This is now the internet. There's one more acronym here called the PAN, which is the personal area network. Personal area network is a network that you establish within your own house. For example, when I get my cell phone into my car, it connects to the car system, and I establish a personal area network. As soon as I get home, it connects to my other phones as well as to my computer, and there's a personal area network. These are ad hoc in nature, which means what? Which means we create them for a limited period of time, then we disembark from them. Okay. In terms of a network system, a system includes people, process, technology, and roles. There are 3 basic kinds of systems. The internet you've heard a lot about. Then there is intranet and extranet. Let's go from the internet all the way to the extranet. The internet, you post something on Facebook, it is available to everybody. Can you verify everybody in there? No. Okay, it is just available to everybody. An intranet, on the other hand, is an organizational portal. For example, when you log on to My Wings, you're logging on to an intranet. Okay, this is where I can securely post your grades and I can verify your identity. The moment you come to UNF card to make a UNF card, I give you a number, I've verified your identity, and I go from there. An extranet lies somewhere in the middle. Here, it's primarily between business partnerships. You're going outside the organization. For example, Dell Premium has established an extranet portal for us. Go to the UNF website and search for Dell Premium Outlet, and they give us special privileges in there. Okay, and do they verify everybody inside UNF? No, they trust that we will. Okay, and as long as there's a broad recognition regarding that trust, it works. Okay, we are now going to start talking about the internet. We'll talk about the intranet a bit, and then we'll talk about the extranet. The internet. This is the system that excites us the most. This is the thing that has changed the world completely and has brought technology to the forefront. An internet is a network of networks that uses TCP/IP protocol to even more networks that don't use the same network language. It is an idea. It is an idea of making this huge network, just having backbone networks across various networks, thus connecting all the networks around the world. So that's one important characteristic. Second important characteristic is it adopts a universal addressing system of IP addresses, okay, and URLs. So what is an IP address? On your machines, okay, you can do the same thing that I'm going to do right now. What does unique URL mean? Every computer on the internet has a unique address called IP address. Just like you have a unique street address. When I send something to 123 Windhurst Lane, it goes to 123 Windhurst Lane, and that's a unique address within a particular city, and the full postal address is unique for the entire country. And once you put the country in, it becomes a unique address for the entire world. Similarly, every computer that is connected to the internet has a unique name, unique address that we call it. The IP address contains 4 numbers, 189203. You can find out what the IP address for this particular machine is by following the instructions on the slide, or you can right click on your network connection, go to network and sharing, find the connection that you're connected with. In this case, I'm connected using my private network, so I'll view the status of that, look at the details. My IP address for this particular machine is 192.168.0.11. okay, and you'll see that if you are at home, your IP address is something very similar. If you are outside in the university, your IP address will be something very different. And if you go and check your neighbor's IP address within the university, the first 3 sets of characters will be exactly the same. Why? Because you are within a LAN. Okay, and these first 3 sets of characters are actually assigned by the IP authorities. Okay, and this is exactly how I can pinpoint. When you go to a website and they actually find out you're from Jacksonville, that's how they find it out, because IP addresses to the University of North Florida are predefined, they're given. Okay, that a certain type of IP address will belong to the University of North Florida. Now, remember, some computers have their own IP addresses, whereas some others are assigned temporarily. When you bring in your laptop into the university and you connect to the university network, I'll give you a temporary IP address. The moment you leave, I'll take it back. Okay, and and you can see that again in the details screen. It was there. Why do I do that? Because certain IP addresses, we're running out of them. Okay, and once I take them back, I can assign it to somebody else. But for the duration that you have that IP address, nobody else in the world has that IP address. Okay. Now, when you go to the university and you go to www.unf.edu, you're actually going to a specific IP address. Okay. So, for example, on this slide, if I wanted to go to this website, I could have typed this IP address, which is assigned to mit.edu, and I will still reach that particular website, or the other one that's listed below. Okay, these are predefined IP addresses. But asking you to remember an IP address rather than www.mit.edu, mit.edu is much easier to remember. So remember, URLs are created just for our benefit. There is no other use for that. Okay, they're created just for our benefit. So what happens is when you request information from unf.edu or from any other website, it sends a packet to an email, a data packet, graphics packet, video packet, or request for information packet. It actually stamps it from who's coming it and to whom is it going. These are both unique IP addresses. So the moment it goes out exactly like the postal system. It goes out, it gets that information, another packet comes to you and goes back into your computer. Okay. Communication protocols, the one that we are using a whole lot, we have been talking about, is IPv4. Let's look at the history of IPv4. Before that, it was RFC 675. It had 2 raised to the power of 8 addresses, and we ran out of those. When we adopted IPv4, we have 2 raised to 32 addresses possible. This was adopted in 1981. And this is the format. The maximum numbers can be 255 in each case. And the last one can be 256. We thought we would never run out of it, but with multiple computers, with each person, and developing countries, like India and China actually doing very well and adopting a lot of computers, we are running out of this. And this problem was understood and addressed. We now have a protocol called IPv6, which is the same basic idea, but instead of having 3-digit decimal numbers, we have 4-digit hexadecimal numbers that can be used to address something. And the number of digits that can go in, or sets of digits that can go in, has gone up from 4 to 6 in this case. So suddenly we have 2 raised to 128 addresses out there. But then why am I still talking about IPv4? The reason why I'm talking about IPv4 is twofold. Number one, it's easier to understand. Second, IPv6 is not yet implemented. Now IPv6 came out in 1998 and we still didn't implement it. There's a very simple reason for this. To implement IPv6, we need all the hardware and software to be upgraded along with it. It's only after XP and more recently Vista came out that IPv6 found full support in the operating systems. Additionally, not all hardware is up to mark. Only the new hardware that came out after 2000, 2002 actually supports IPv6. Finally, don't underestimate the power of people. People need to understand how systems work. Okay, and we did not. For the longest time, IPv6 network engineers did not exist. Okay, now we are starting to see new networks that are getting implemented are done on IPv6 system. even UNF network is getting upgraded to IPv6, and we will see the benefits of that as we go along. The next slide you see is a video of how do I actually get the information on my screen in a cartoonish form. It's an animated video. It's slightly cheesy, but I think it's a very good video, and I think you'll remember it because it actually explains the concept very well. All right.
For the first time in history, people and machinery are working together, realizing a dream. A uniting force that knows no geographical boundaries without regard to race, creed, or color. A new era where communication truly brings people together. This is the dawn of the net. Want to know how it works? Click here to begin your journey into the net. Now, exactly what happened when you clicked on that link? You started a flow of information. This information travels down into your own personal mailroom, where Mr. IP packages it, labels it, and sends it on its way. Each packet is limited in its size. The mailroom must decide how to divide the information and how to package it. Now, the package needs a label containing important information, such as sender's address, receiver's address, and the type of packet it is. Because this particular packet is going out onto the internet, it also gets an address for the proxy server, which has a special function, as we'll see later. The packet is now launched onto your local area network, or LAN. This network is used to connect all the local computers, routers, printers, etc. for information exchange within the physical walls of the building. The LAN is a pretty uncontrolled place, and unfortunately, accidents can happen. The highway of the LAN is packed with all types of information. These are IP packets, Novell packets, Apple Talk packets. They're going against traffic, as usual. The local router reads the address and, if necessary, lifts the packet onto another network. The router, a symbol of control in a seemingly disorganized world.
Whoops, sorry about that. Let's move this one here, this one here. This moves here, this one goes here. I don't like this one. Let's go with this one. Let's go here. A little bit left. Let's move with this one here. Another channel here. Let's put that one here. Another one there. Let's put that one here.
There he is, systematic, uncaring, methodical, conservative, and sometimes not quite up to speed.
Sorry.
But at least he is exact, for the most part.
That's not what it is. That one was there. That one was there. That one was there. And this one was there. Another one was there. That was there. He's behind. That one was there. That was there. He was there. Oh, let's put that one there.
As the packets leave the router, they make their way into the corporate intranet and head for the router switch. A bit more efficient than the router switch plays fast and loose with IP packets, deftly routing them along their way. A digital pinball wizard, if you will.
Here we go. Here comes another one. And it's another. Watch this, Mom. Here goes. Whoop, we're on the back. Hey, in there. Over the left, over the right, over the left, over the right. You got it. Here it comes. Right down. He shoots. He scores. It's going. Hey, wait. Here, watch out. Here comes another one. Oh, here we go. And it's gone.
As packets arrive at their destination, they're picked up by the network interface, ready to be sent to the next level. In this case, the proxy. The proxy is used by many companies as sort of a middleman in order to lessen the load on their internet connection, and for security reasons as well. As you can see, the packets are all of various sizes, depending upon their content. The proxy opens the packet and looks for the web address or URL. Depending upon whether the address is acceptable, the packet is sent on to the internet. There are, however, some addresses which do not meet with the approval of the proxy, that is to say, corporate or management guidelines. These are summarily dealt with. We'll have none of that. For those who make it, it's on the road again. Next up, the firewall. The corporate firewall serves two purposes. It prevents some rather nasty things from the internet from coming into the intranet, and it can also prevent sensitive corporate information from being sent out onto the internet. Once through the firewall, a router picks up the packet and places it onto a much narrower road, or bandwidth, as we say. Obviously, the road is not broad enough to take them all. Now you might wonder what happens to all those packets which don't make it along the way. Well, when Mr. IP doesn't receive an acknowledgement that a packet has been received in due time, he simply sends a replacement packet. We are now ready to enter the world of the Internet. A spider web of interconnected networks which span our entire globe. Here, routers and switches establish links between networks. Now, the net is an entirely different environment than you'll find within the protected walls of your LAN. Out here, it's the Wild West. Plenty of space, plenty of opportunities, plenty of things to explore and places to go. Thanks to very little control and regulation, new ideas find fertile soil to push the envelope of their possibilities. But because of this freedom, certain dangers also lurk. You'll never know when you'll meet the dreaded ping of death. A special version of a normal request ping, which some idiot thought up to mess up unsuspecting hosts. The paths our packets take may be via satellite, telephone lines, wireless, or even transoceanic cable. They don't always take the fastest or shortest routes possible, but they will get there. Eventually. Maybe that's why it's sometimes called the worldwide wait. But when everything is working smoothly, you can circumvent the globe 5 times over at the drop of a hat. Literally. And all for the cost of a local call or less. Near the end of our destination, we'll find another firewall. Depending upon your perspective as a data packet, the firewall can be a bastion of security or a dreaded adversary. It all depends on which side you're on and what your intentions are. The firewall is designed to let in only those packets that meet its criteria. This firewall is operating on ports 80 and 25. all attempts to enter through other ports are closed for business. Port 25 is used for mail packets, while Port 80 is the entrance for packets from the Internet to the web server. Inside the firewall, packets are screened more thoroughly. Some packets make it easily through customs, while others look just a bit dubious. Now, the firewall officer is not easily fooled, such as when this ping of death packet tries to disguise itself as a normal ping packet.
It's okay, go on, it's okay, no problem. Have a nice day. Be out of here. Bye.
For those packets lucky enough to make it this far, the journey is almost over. It's just a lineup on the interface to be taken up into the web server. Nowadays, a web server can run on many things, from a mainframe to a webcam to the computer on your desk, or why not your refrigerator? With a proper setup, you can find out if you have the makings for chicken cacciatore or if you have to go shopping. Remember, this is the dawn of the net. Almost anything's possible. One by one, the packets are received, opened, and unpacked. The information they contain, that is, your request for information, is sent on to the web server application. The packet itself is recycled, ready to be used again, and filled with your requested information. Addressed and sent out on its way back to you. Back past the firewall, routers, and on through to the Internet. Back through your corporate firewall. And onto your interface. Ready to supply your web browser with the information you requested. That is, this film. Pleased with their efforts and trusting in a better world, our trusty data packets ride off blissfully into the sunset of another day, knowing fully they have served their masters well. Now, isn't that a happy ending?
So now that you understand how internet data is actually transmitted from one location to another, the next thing you need to know is how domain names are actually assigned. When the internet started, it started as ARPANET with the government, with the Department of Defense in the US. Okay, and we all understand now that URLs or things like unf.edu are basically names designed for human consumption. Okay, so these are the common ones. .edu stands for education universities, primarily US education universities. .gov is for US government. .mil is for US military. .org and .net, these were the first 5 domain names that were out there. Then as the usage of internet has expanded over the years, a lot more end-level domain, top-level domain names have come up. What has also come up is the fact that there are country level domains. For example, .in for India, .uk for US, and .uk for United Kingdom, .us for the US actually. So an education university in the US would be, for example, let's say University of Wales .ac, that is what academic universities call themselves, .uk. Now this becomes really important when there are corporate level domains. So for example, Procter & Gamble, P&G, which is a big time brand name. In worldwide domain name is called .com. Specific country level domain names are called png.co.fr for France. What it allows companies to do is to customize their websites for that specific country. For example, in the US, most people buy fast-moving consumer goods based on logical perceptions, whereas in France, more of a touchy-feely perception works. So if you go to these two different websites, the American website and the French website, you will see the difference in the appeal. Also, google.co.in, google.co.ca for China, you can customize the search for that specific area. Another thing that needs to be understood is this idea of data security. Okay, why is this important in a networking lecture? Anything that goes on a communication channel is available to everybody, especially on the internet. Okay, the internet doesn't have any private boxes, any private lanes that you can send stuff through. So you need to encrypt stuff. You have to assume that everybody will have access to that information, but they might not be able to understand it. That's the basic premise of encryption. So if you remember an old language that we used to all have as kids, it was called Pig Latin, where we added something at the end of every word. We assumed that anybody else who understood Pig Latin would be able to understand it, and somebody who did not understand Pig Latin would not be able to understand it. That is the idea of a shared key. Shared key here is Pig Latin. Okay, now what the sender does, he takes his document, encrypts it using the secret shared key, sends it to the recipient. Since both of them have this shared secret key, he's able to encrypt it, decrypt it, and understand the document. This is called symmetric encryption. The problem with this one is anybody who has access to this secret shared key will be able to understand it. And once you lose the secret shared key and somebody else has it, your document is available to everybody else. That's when engineers came up with this idea of asymmetric encryption. What happens here is, if the sender wants to send the document over to the recipient, he takes the recipient's public key, okay, and encrypts it using the recipient's public key. This document can then only be opened by the recipient who has his own little private key. This is public. Everybody else has this. This only the recipient has. So only the recipient can decrypt the document. This is called asymmetric encryption. This is the one that's taking hold in most organizations and in most places. You will also hear the term PGP, which stands for pretty good encryption, and that's what this is all about. Another one that a lot of people are trying to do and has been very successful is to do a secured socket layer or a transportation layer security. Whenever you see HTTPS, okay, what happens here is, while you are not really exchanging keys from an application perspective at a data level, remember those five layers of IP protocol that we had, and I said the first two are not really important. The engineers take care of it. That's where this works on. The HTTPS here stands for secure. You will also see a lock on your browser like this, sometimes in the status bar, sometimes in the top bar, depending on your provision of browser. What it does, it does exactly the same thing as asymmetric encryption. Basically, between the client and the server, you're setting up a protocol for encrypted data transmission. Again, we are assuming that anybody has access to all of this. It is only people who have access to the right keys are able to understand it. Okay? Now this is very prevalent when you do your banking. Another thing that helps in network security is what is called as a firewall. To my construction friends here, what is a firewall? A firewall is something that keeps the fire out. Okay, in a computer language, it does exactly the same thing. The idea is to keep the rest of the world, the internet, out of your private network. Now there are 4 different ways in which you can do it. Not necessary for you to know. I've put it on the slide so that you are able to read about it in case you are interested. But the concept of a firewall is to keep the world out and keep your own network very safe. So this is a private network, private LAN, and this is the internet. Okay, but sometimes you still want to get to your private network from the internet. What you do at that time is you create a VPN connection or a virtual private network. So if this is your internet pipeline, what you do is you literally drill a hole inside this network, a tunnel, okay, and you have a secured access to your own LAN from outside. Most intranet today is done through VPN. When I want to access my email as a faculty member from home, I do a VPN connection to my computer. The idea is again to do a very secured connection to your computer. Remember, the channel is accessible to everybody. The encryption is not. Alright, let's start to wind this down. I really quickly wanted to talk about your home computer just to give you an idea of what is happening at your home. All of you are pretty much connected using a DSL or a cable modem nowadays. Okay. Now, this is how your home network looks like. You will have some wireless computers and you will have some wired computers. Okay. This is an equipment that your cable company or phone company gives you. They act as the ISP. Each DSL or cable modem has a particular external IP address. Okay, this is a public IP address that your DSL or a cable modem gets. We don't have enough IP addresses to give IP address to all computers inside your house. So what we do is this big router, an Ethernet switch that you have, what it does is it assigns private IP addresses. So in the earlier part of the lecture, you saw that my IP address for this laptop was 192.68.0.11. 168. Okay, this is pretty common across all computers. Okay, when you look at your wireless computer and you try and find the IP address, this is the IP address you'll get, at least the first 2 or 3 digits, sets of digits. Whenever you send a request from one of your wired computers, to get some data from the internet, or wireless computer to get some data from the internet, what happens is the router logs it Okay, says computer 1 requested this information. Its address is 192.168.0.1. My IP address here is 252.175.3.7 for the cable modem, which is the one thing that is available to the rest of the world. And what it looks to the rest of the world is your cable modem is actually asking for that information. The router, once it gets the information back, looks at the logs and then sends the computer information back to the wired computer. What it does is something very phenomenal. It makes your home network invisible to the rest of the world. So if you set up your firewall at this level correctly in your router, your home network can never be seen by anybody else. It also creates issues in terms of gaming when you have to sometimes configure your Xbox or your PS2 or your wired computer differently, because you have to go through a proxy server just to look like you are available on the internet. Because your computers, these computers, are not really on the internet. They are on a local network which is connected to the internet. Okay? Let me look at this slide. I think we've covered all of this. We've covered the router part. We said that there are two types of addresses, private and public. The public is given by the ISP and is with the modem. All other components inside the house have private addresses. We talked about this. Okay, let's talk about security. There's a huge hue and cry about security on the web. In the UK, there's a law that now states that if somebody uses your internet wireless connection to do a felony, you are partially responsible for this. I don't think the law is there's a ruling on this in the US, but if a ruling has to come, I think it will fall on the same lines. So please don't share your internet. Secondly, whenever something is inside your local network, it is assumed to be trusted. So if somebody is standing in a parking lot is using your Wi-Fi connection, it'll be considered as a trusted connection, and that person will be allowed to browse through all your home computers even without you knowing sometimes. There are many security settings you can use: WEP, WPA, WPA2, MAC address filtering, etc. Find your router IP address, and the rest is very simple. It depends on the router, but it's very simple to follow. I'm going to post a link to an iTunes video which will describe exactly how to set these settings up, but it is very, very important for you to set these settings up. Let me see if I can find these settings on my computer. It's not. Alright. So let me conclude. Now that you understand your home office, if you have any questions, do email me or do post them on the discussion board. Conclusion. This is what is happening around the world that you have to be aware of. There's a decreasing price-performance ratio. There's faster transmission. It is getting cheaper. There's more bandwidth and bigger transmission pipes available. The world is getting simpler. There's increased standardization. Extensive use of TCP/IP. Pretty much everybody's now shifting to the internet. There are no private lines. Everybody's doing their work through the internet. But there is also greater management complexity due to the fact that people now expect anytime, anywhere access and support, and you'll have to provide it to them or set their expectations right. But right now, this is what is happening. The problem continues to be in the last mile. There is enough bandwidth on the internet. It is getting connected to the internet where the problem is. We are changing from an electrical to an optical transmission. The future is bright. The future transmissions are going to be through fiber optics. That is the future. The future is also wireless. More and more components in the house are going towards wireless. Just a reminder, the current standard is N. Please try and get all applications that support N. Questions for you. Should we go peer-to-peer or client-server? There are advantages and disadvantages on both sides. When we go to the knowledge management set of lectures, we'll discuss it some more and understand it some more. Question for you. How will you overcome the last mile? How will you overcome the last mile for somebody who's sitting in the middle of a desert, or even, for example, one of our faculty members who lives 50 miles south of Jacksonville, and she's not able to get DSL or cable broadband there? What do you do? How do you overcome the last mile? I just wanted to give you an overview. This is what the Navy's platform looks like. Probably your organizations might not be as complex as this, but it'll get pretty close. You will not use a single mode of transmission of data in any case. So you better be aware of it. Okay? So let me give you a cheat sheet. Yes, when you have to compare different networking alternatives. This cheat sheet is one of those sheets that you print and keep and file in your office. Okay? When somebody is asking you to make choices regarding networks, these are the questions you have to ask. There are issues of cost, there are issues regarding performance, and there are strategic issues. Okay, my idea is to give you enough understanding regarding networking and ability to ask the right questions. So hopefully you've gained something out of this lecture. I thank you for attending it, and please post questions on the discussion board if you have any. Thank you.